So, we all know that college writing is different from other types of writing. You write differently in college than in high school, and you write differently in college and in academia than you would for the workplace. So, we have some contextual differences on how we write and what we write and the process that we go about in order to write. So, I thought it would be helpful to hear from some of you guys and get a list of your writing rules and the myths or rumors that you've heard about writing over the years because we tend to accumulate all of those. And sometimes we put those myths or rumors into that column of good advice, and we end up following those myths and rumors instead of following just the good advice. And sometimes there is some gray room and some wiggle room in the rules that we know and that we're allowed to kind of deviate from in college writing than we were able to do in high school or the workplace. Right, so I collected all of your guys's rules and myths, and we're going to go through. I think I've got three different slides here. One slide will look at the good advice and some things that I pulled from your list that we can use in college writing. Another slide where we have some gray area where we might deviate from the rules a little bit depending on the situation. And then a last slide of things that are probably not true, things that are probably myths or rumors. So we'll go through all of that in this set of lecture notes. And I do appreciate your patience in letting me get this all put together. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our rules. Okay, good advice. Some good advice: when writing, you will need to compose multiple drafts. Regardless, practice writing every day. This is a really good advice. Both parts are good pieces of advice. In particular, we do a lot of drafting in our class, so you will need to compose multiple drafts. In a lot of your writing in academia, it's helpful to take a break in between drafts and then come back to the writing process. And it's also helpful to practice writing every day. We do that with our journal writing. Okay, always read guidelines before submitting an assignment. Do thorough research when needed. Also, good advice. I have a lot of specific guidelines or instructions with regard to our papers, so do make sure that you're reading and that you're clear in your understanding of the assignment. Ask questions of me or of your instructors as well if you don't understand those instructions. Okay, always cite sources when using them in an essay. Use as many sources as necessary. All sources should be credible. Another good piece of advice: you want to make sure that if there is a outside source requirement, that you are meeting that requirement, that you're doing the research needed so that you can present those sources in a way that shows their credibility. So, who's written this source? Where did it come from? Being able to show that shows the credibility of the source. Right? Give background information to any supporting text. Again, this goes towards the credibility of the source. If you can show that the author of the source has background information in the content area or in the subject area, then that goes a long way to helping you support your own points. Okay, when you have good outside sources, it helps your own support of your points. Okay. Okay, avoid using contractions, abbreviations, slang, and improper word choice, i.e., awesome, gotcha, lol. We want to make sure that the writing we're doing is for the appropriate audience. So that means perhaps trying to understand your audience ahead of drafting the paper. And with regard to word choice, means that slang terms are not necessarily what you want to include in your academic writing for college. Okay, seek feedback from others on your writing. We do this through peer review, but also be open to suggestions. So, making sure as many people as possible see your paper before you submit it is a good thing. Have a parent, a sibling, a roommate, a friend read through your draft and give you feedback, and be willing to receive that feedback. That's kind of the hard part of going through peer review and getting feedback, is being willing to receive that and make changes. Okay. All right, use a thesis statement to present the controlling idea of an essay. Great idea. We practice thesis statement and thesis statement writing in our essays and including that so that we have proper guidance for the reader so they know what the remaining essay is going to be about. Okay, and it's best to have a thesis statement before you begin writing. Not always. And this is going to lead us into our next slide where we talk about some areas where we have kind of deviation from the rules, right? You don't always know your main or controlling idea when you go into a paper. A lot of the time you do, but sometimes your ideas or concepts on the topic change as you write. So be willing to change or modify your thesis statement as you go. And make sure, again, that you go back to the beginning of your paper and make changes if necessary, if the content of your paper changes as you go through and write. Okay, things that are not entirely true, to expand upon that: never use first person point of view, I, we, my, mine in your writing. Never use the word you, your, you are, yourself in college level writing. Now that first part, I, we, my, and mine, some papers, in particular papers for our class, you need to bring in personal experience. How else do you address that but to say the words I and mine, right? So you will need to use first person point of view in our class and potentially in papers that you write for other classes. So it's not strictly forbidden in our class or college-wide to use first person point of view. Now for our class, specifically our class, second person point of view, using the words you, you are, yourself, I do ask that you do not use second person in your writing. So do avoid that kind of point of view shift. Okay. College writing is harder than high school, but can be more fun than in high school. This depends entirely on your perspective. Some people believe that college writing is easier. Perhaps they had very rigorous high school AP classes or very strict English teachers in high school, and they feel like they can finally breathe and relax a little bit so that college writing is actually easier. Or again, vice versa, very relaxed English teachers in high school, maybe that does make your college writing experience more difficult. Okay, that's all entirely perspective. I hope it's more fun than high school just because I want you guys to have fun while you're writing your papers as much as you can. It's work, but it can be fun work, right? Or at least that's the hope. Okay, the writer can choose the topic of the essay in college. Not always true, sometimes true. With our papers, I give you an overall kind of guideline for your first paper. It's your writing process, so you can pick and choose what part of your writing process you want to share. Right? So you have some discerning ability with regard to this paper topic. For our next paper topic, for the rhetorical analysis essay, you can choose the text that you analyze, but you have to follow the guidelines for the type of analysis. Sometimes you'll be able in college and in academic writing to have even more flexibility with regard to your paper topic. But other times, again, you do need to make sure that you're reading through guidelines and that you're fulfilling those specific guidelines, even if there is flexibility. Okay. I know in other classes and in other assignments, I give very specific, exact guidelines to paper topics, and there isn't a lot of flexibility. So again, it depends on your instructor and the assignment that you're doing. Right? Be prepared to write a paper that is X pages long. And I saw some people say 6+ pages, some people say 10+ pages, some said 20+ pages, or be willing to write every day of the week, or be willing to write at least twice a week for so many weeks in a quarter. Again, not always true. A lot of your undergraduate career, most likely you won't go beyond a 10 to 15 page paper for your classes. We max out at 6, maybe 7 pages tops, and that's going through both 101A and 101B. Okay, so we're not going to do anything that's longer than that. All right. A lot of your immediate writing, day-to-day writing will be a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs in length when you're going through and posting your OPs to discussion boards or working on your drafts. You might have perhaps a little bit longer writing to do, but we're not going to do a lot of writing like that, 20+ pages in a short span of time. And again, that's not something you typically see in college level classes at the undergraduate level. Maybe as a graduate student, you'll get into paper writing that's a bit more extensive, but not in undergraduate courses. Okay. Professors don't care whether you pass or fail. They may never even learn your name. That's not true for our class, and that's not true for any English class of any instructor that I know here at Central. We do care whether or not you pass or fail. We are here for you. It's part of our job is to provide you learning support so that you feel comfortable in your writing. I do my best to learn people's names. I'm not great at it. I'm really good, especially in online classes, of mispronouncing names. So if we ever Zoom talk and I mispronounce your name, it's because we haven't met in person and I haven't practiced saying your name out loud. Especially the easy names. I'm really bad at easy names. Okay? All right. This last section I'm going to talk about here, never add anecdotes or always add anecdotes. This was one of the comments that was made, or part of one of our classmates' lists. And we can't ever really put a 100% on anecdotes in essays. We can't say never to add a short story or narrative because that's actually one of our narrative hooks that we can use to draw a reader in and get their attention. We can't say to always add anecdotes because maybe the paper topic or subject material isn't appropriate to that kind of language or that kind of shift. So this is something that entirely depends on the type of paper you're writing and your instructor. So whether or not you use a specific writing method sometimes has a constraint put upon it by the type of paper you're writing. Again, wholly dependent on what type of paper and what your instructor's guidelines are. All right, things that are likely not true. Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, 10.5 times out of 10, 20 times out of 10, not true. First and foremost, writing comes naturally to some. Most likely, this is something that is not an across the board kind of thing. Some people like writing more than others. Some people feel more comfortable doing writing more than others. But I wouldn't say necessarily that writing comes naturally to some more than others. Okay, this is again more of a perspective issue where perhaps it's something that you enjoy doing more, so it feels easier. And other people might enjoy it and maybe it's not as easy, but it's not necessarily an issue of it being natural to some and not to others. Okay, using bigger words and papers shows how smart you are. It helps you to sound academic. Again, not necessarily true. I don't want you cracking out the thesaurus and going through and finding 5 different ways to say the same word. I do want your own natural voice to shine through. And at the same time, if you need the thesaurus, by all means use it, but bigger doesn't always mean better. A lot of the time in writing, we're looking for you to simplify your thoughts and ideas so that they are clear. Okay, and so that you can communicate your concepts better to your audience. And the bigger words don't really help us with that goal. Right? Never start an essay with a question. Not true. This is something that is absolutely 100% allowed and encouraged when you're writing an introductory paragraph where you want to draw the reader in. If you present the reader with a complex or interesting question, you can really get their attention and have them be drawn into your writing. Right, paragraphs must be a specific length, 7 to 10 sentences long, so that they aren't overly short or overly long. Now, my guideline for paragraph writing, I like to see balanced paragraphs. I like to see paragraphs that are at least 4 sentences long so that you have a chance to present your main idea and support that main idea within the paragraph. But I don't procure a specific length of 7 to 10 sentences. I eyeball paragraphs by page length as well. So a full page that is a paragraph long, if it's only 7 sentences, still is probably a bulky paragraph. Okay, so we can't always judge paragraph length as a specific hardcore guideline. That's something that's malleable. All right. Never use the word because or the words and or but to start a sentence. Not true that this is a hardcore rule either. So long as you are writing a complete sentence and a clear sentence, you can use whichever word you want to start that sentence. Okay, professors won't help unless you ask them. Likely not true. I often butt my head in and offer help and guidance when you don't necessarily want it or ask for it. It is helpful for you to ask first. That way I don't feel as though I'm overstepping. Right? So do ask questions, ask for help. I will try and reach out when I can and where I can in order to help as much as possible, though. Okay, you'll fail a paper if you do not have proper grammar, punctuation, or a proper writing style or technique established within your paper. Not true. Okay, not everybody is going through with that red pen, circling every comma and passing judgment. Certainly not in our papers. I do look at proofreading, I do look at grammar, but the goal in our beginning essays, the goal is to make you a better writer. So I'm going to do my best to highlight those areas so that you know where your trouble areas are and we can help you work through how to place that comma. Okay, so it's not necessarily something that is going to fail you for your paper. At least in our class, a very minimal part of your paper grade, usually less than 10% of your paper grade. Okay. All right, you have to be a good reader to be a good writer. Not true. Right, and I could give some anecdotal evidence to this. My older sister hates reading, hates writing, great at stories, great at building a clear narrative, a wonderful writer. Again, hates reading. I don't think that she really read through any books until maybe she was 12 or 13 and she found R.L. Stine and horror and Stephen King. So for some people, reading is just not the thing, but writing is good. Or vice versa. Maybe you hate to write, but you love to read. They are paired together necessarily, but one doesn't necessarily negate the other. Okay? All right. What are my rules for college writing? Well, I only have a couple. One is that even if you do not like the topic, I want you to do your best to find something enjoyable about what you're writing or how you're writing it. Okay? I want you to have as much fun as you can with these major paper assignments. Right. My next rule, as much as possible, take advantage of the resources that you have available here at Central. That includes me. So if you would like my feedback more so than you've been getting, just raise a hand metaphorically. Send me an email. Let me know. Okay, and I can do my best to get back to you and give you more feedback. Go to the Writing Center. Virtually, you can use the Writing Center resources to get feedback on your drafts. Right? There are a lot of different ways you can get constructive criticism on your writing so that you have a better built paper, and Central has those resources, so take advantage. Okay, those are my rules. All right. Hopefully this list and going through this visually was helpful to you to understand the good advice versus where we have some flexibility or malleability in the rules versus where we have some concrete lines that we don't cross. And hopefully that's helpful to you as you move forward with the papers for our class.